With one swipe of a midfielder's hand, the Rovers' interim management team of Mickey Cameron and John Potter saw their win rate halved on Saturday, with Shaun Byrne's red card the catalyst for a defeat to Ayr United. With reports out of Belfast suggesting that the Rovers are doing everything they can to make Linfield's David Healy their new manager, Scott Brown's side continued to make the most of the faltering starts of last season's playoff hopefuls, finishing the afternoon with a 9-point gap over the Rovers and Airdrie and a full 11 points clear of Partick Thistle. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and joining me this afternoon, or this evening, to talk through Ayr United 2, Wraith Rovers 0, we have Leslie Maybon. First of all, how are you, Les?
Great, and as a fan of 1960s sports cars, I am very excited about something large and powerful with the name of Healy coming in the direction of Kirkcaldy. Not quite sure we're going to get the 3-litre V8 out of our new gaffer, if that's who we get, but very excited nonetheless.
Yeah, I think we will have some discussion of David Healy today, but probably not a huge amount, mostly for fear of jinxing it at this stage, to be perfectly honest with you. We've also got Callum Blythe as well. How are you, Callum?
I have managed to survive the human rights violation that was the lack of catering at Ayr United, so I will take that.
Fair play. And we've got Scott Fleming as well. How are you, Scott?
Yeah, not too bad, all things considered, after yesterday, but I suppose we'll just need to hope that next week can get a bit better.
That's exactly it, yeah. Just going to try and move past this one as quickly as possible. And I think in that vein, I don't know necessarily how much time we're going to spend wallowing in yesterday's defeat. But let's start where we always do, and with the starting lineup, which was, as always seems to be the case. I don't know if every football team's like this, or if it's uniquely Rovers that everyone has to spend the full hour before kick-off trying to work out who the hell's playing where every single week. And the big surprise with this one is, I think, looking at the team line, just about everyone had worked their way round to assuming it must have been a back three, which so obviously, of course, it wasn't. Lewis Stevenson made a somewhat surprising appearance at right back. Leslie, with that in mind, do you think that's basically a case of starting from the point of wanting Ross Matthews for his kind of steal in midfield and then working backwards from there? Or do you think there's maybe some other kind of logic at play?
I think it absolutely had to be wanting Matthews in midfield, because we've seen in the first two league games in particular that we'd really struggled just to kind of get anything in there and just to break things up, particularly before we had the penalty against Partick. It was one-way traffic, and you were just thinking we need somebody in there just to break things up and disrupt things. So I think the thinking had been that with Brown not being available, that we wanted Matthews back in there. And I'd been a big advocate of Kieran Freeman getting game time for that reason, if nothing else, that what you might lose through him still getting up to speed at right back, you more than gain from having an actual midfielder in the base of midfield alongside Shaun Byrne. So I thought, well, again, like everybody else, I thought we were going to go with a back three, and I thought we were going to have Stevenson as a kind of left wing back and Matthews as a sort of right wing back. But as it turned out, that wasn't what happened. But I think, that the logic would have been that, you get Matthews in there and you just add a bit more in the midfield, particularly when we saw the way in which Ayr completely overran Airdrie in the televised game. When you kind of look at it through that lens, it seemed like the right and sensible thing to do.
Yeah, I thought it made sense. In the kind of opening exchanges, I think both teams did kind of cancel each other out. And I'll come back to that in a second. But just while we're on the lineup, just to kind of mention it. So we were expecting to see Lewis Vaughan back, but it seems like he'd picked up a very small niggle at the very kind of end of the training session on Friday. John Potter in the same category put Kieran Freeman and Sam Stanton, small niggles that kept them away. And while I was saying that, it was good to see Jack Hamilton running around in the background of that interview. So he's obviously not a million miles away if he's back running. I didn't hear any mention of Scott Brown. I don't know if we've got any kind of prognosis on that, but again, hopefully sooner rather than later for him. We did, though, see Paul Hanlon coming back in the lineup. And I think he might be in contention for the when we have the brief man of the match conversation later on. I thought he was excellent. But in terms of the teams cancelling each other out, Callum, we'll obviously get on the penalty and the red card as the kind of dominating incident for the whole game. But up until that point, would you agree with that? Both teams are cancelling each other out, or did you think one side had the upper hand in the first 35 or so minutes?
Yeah, it really was as a case of unstoppable force versus immovable object, really. Obviously, it's two of the top sides in the division going up against each other. And yes, we do have our injuries. And to be fair, I did not even know that Stevenson could play right back. But it felt not quite 50-50, maybe like 55 towards Air. I felt like Air for a first like 10-15 minutes felt like they might have edged it, and there was like another 10-minute period where we might have edged it, and then Air started to get back into it again before the penalty. But it was feeling very even, that game, up until that penalty.
Yeah, I mean, they had the one chance where they hit the post, but that is, and I watched the highlights, that's still the only chance I can really actually remember from that kind of opening period. There wasn't a couple of shots for distance and all that kind of stuff, but it was a bit of a sort of war of attrition. But let's just fast forward straight to the penalty. That's going to be the big sort of talking point. So a lot going on in a very short space of time here, but essentially Kevin Dabrowski's he's passed the ball by Paul Hanlon. I don't know what happened yesterday. We seem to suddenly be back to like last year's pre-season Kevin Dabrowski with the ball at his feet. Just kind of miskicked the very first one that came to him, and then it just seemed like his confidence had gone. There's a couple others where he kind of managed to get away with it, but with this one, it's not the worst kick you'll ever see. He basically shanks the ball straight at Shaun Byrne. Byrne's not expecting it, and as a result, his first touch is poor, and he's going back towards his own goal. He's then barged in the back to some degree, which we'll discuss, by Anton Dowds. And as he's on his way down, he sort of grabs at the ball in that classic footballer's fashion of, like, it's that, what are you going to do? Shoot me? Kind of towards the referee, like, look, you can either give this very reasonable free kick the other way or a red card and a penalty. Are you really going to do that? And as it turns out, yes. Yes, he is. So Dowds actually still manages to get the ball and gets a shot away. But by that point, the referee's already blown the whistle, which I think is a key point I'm going to come back to. So he points for the penalty. He then gets a yellow card out of his pocket. The Air players surround him because they want it to be a red card, and he changes his mind and does indeed produce a red card. And at that point, Anton Dowds sticks the penalty away. So, Scott, let's kind of start from the beginning on that one. First of all, do you think it's a foul on Shaun Byrne?
It's tough to tell from the highlights, and the fact that I wasn't at the game as well. Like, even the fact that like some of you guys that were at the game were not even sure. It's hard to tell for that angle how much contact there really was. But it's one of these ones that you see them giving all the time, like round, like in the middle of the park, just somebody's like kind of nudged into somebody from behind, and he kind of just stumbles over, and the ref goes, "Oh well, it's an easy foul to just give this." As you say, like it's one of them ones. So that's why I think there was a bit of confusion, probably with Byrne himself, thinking that he was just going to get it. I mean, he maybe it'll be a tough way to learn, but he did it at Tannadice last year. I don't know if you remember, very late in the game in the middle of the park, and he, I think, even more so cuddled the ball into him, and yet got the free kick for it. So, I mean, it was just obviously one of these ones that the referees just went, "Nah, it's not much a foul," and yeah, you've actually just made my decision for me that you've just decided to handball, a deliberate handball in the box. But it's Yeah, I think it is just going to end up being that Byrne needs to learn not to do that now.
Yeah, I was talking to John Greer at half time, and that was what I said to him was I think 4 out of 10 referees give the foul straight away. Just like the initial as Dowds kind of comes across Byrne, they give the foul, and I think that probably goes up to sort of 6 or 7 when Byrne grabs the ball, purely because it is that thing where you're like it's close enough to being a foul, and it's such a huge decision to then go red card penalty that I think just human nature, you go, oh, actually, I'm just going to move on with this, give the foul the other way. But with the fact that, as I say, so Byrne kind of grabs at the ball, but he doesn't quite manage, as you say, Scott, kind of cuddle it into himself. So the ball's actually still loose, and Dowds digs it away, but the whistle goes. And Kev Dabrowski actually tips the ball kind of over the bar, but he's barely trying at that point because he's heard the whistle. It's a very kind of lackadaisical, but still quite effective save. But I think this is where the referee actually has kind of made a rod for his own back. So the red card is for denying a goal-scoring opportunity, denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity. That's what that red card offence is. But Dowds ends up with a ball and gets a shot away. So I would have made the argument, I did make the argument last night, that he's not denying a clear goal-scoring opportunity. But actually, the fact that the referee's blown the whistle means that he has. So the referee's actually, if he'd played the advantage almost, he wouldn't have had to have sent Byrne off. But because he's blown the whistle, he then does. So actually, on the kind of balance of probabilities, having watched it all, I actually think the referee fundamentally has arrived at the right decision. I think it's probably not quite a foul on Byrne. Then, once there's a handball, you have to give it. If he blows the whistle, I think it then has to be a red card. Leslie, how about you? Are you where do you fall down on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, like Scott, when you look at the highlights back, I mean, you'd circulated earlier today, Duncan, a video from a different angle, and even seeing that, trying to figure out what's actually going on. So I don't know if any of you guys remember The Guardian used to do, maybe still do actually, they used to do the series called You Are the Ref. And
yes.
You'd be given this really improbable scenario of like weird things happening, and you had to work out of a multiple choice what the correct decision to make was. And it always had like, a kind of cartoon drawing of like Stevie Clark or Davy Moyes or something like that. And then what now? It felt like one of those scenarios. Like the player is barged over, he then grabs the ball, does not clear the ball, the opposition player gets a shot away, the goalkeeper saves it. What now? And then the bit they missed out was the guy that looks like an extra from Love Island comes charging in and pressurises you to take your yellow card away and put a red card out. But I think, yeah, on balance, having seen it all back, I'd agree. I think ultimately the referee does arrive at the right decision. It's one of these ones, had it been one of the Premier League, they would have watched VAR back for 5 minutes and still come to the wrong decision. The double jeopardy aspect of it seems really harsh. I think by the book, it is, Byrne does fall down in the box, he does handle the ball, and therefore, it's a penalty, it is a red card. It does seem extremely harsh, but I think by the rules, it's right. Interestingly, the only other kind of angle I would add to it is you listen to John Potter in the post-match, and he wasn't raging about it. He wasn't claiming there'd been some great injustice. He'd said he'd spoken to the referee, he'd seen it from we'd seen it, and wasn't raging about it, wasn't ranting and raving at the referee, which tends to suggest that ultimately, I think, unfortunately, ended up being an unfortunate decision, but probably the right one.
Yeah, it's probably worth just clearing up the double jeopardy aspect of it, because we were speaking about it earlier on today, and I think it's a rule that's easy to get confused about, where it's much less common now that you'll see a player given a red card for conceding a penalty. A lot of the time it's kind of downgraded to a yellow, but that is only in the case where it's I think the best way to think about it is an honest attempt to play the ball. So if you are the last man, for example, you kind of dive in with a challenge to try and win the ball, but you don't get it and you foul the player, it's still a penalty, but you only given a yellow card because you made an honest attempt to play the ball, you just got it wrong. so they don't double punish that with a penalty and a red card. But that doesn't apply if it's, for example, you trying to just grab the ball away from someone, or even something like a shirt pull, where it's more cynical, there's more of an attempt to actually commit an offence, then you're still going to get the red card for the offence and the penalty for obviously conceding the foul. Callum, anything you want to add on that incident?
Not really. I mean, at the time, I was not. I wasn't actually annoyed at the ref at the time, because I did just see. Obviously, he got bundled over, but it's one of those where it's like sometimes it's given, sometimes it's not. So it's just sort of like, okay, fair enough. But then to see Shaun Byrne just like swat the ball away, and I'm like, that is the stupidest thing I have ever seen someone do. Like, if it's like you say, it's just like falling over and like grabbing over the ball. It's like, yeah, you see that happen all the time, but that's usually when it's, you know, like in the middle of the pitch, not when you're falling into your own box, where, you know, it's like, if the referee does deem that you've just handballed it, well done, you've given away a penalty. It's one of those. But I mean, again, with the whole referee, with like, obviously he's stood there with the yellow card out, and he's like probably like fully just like about to like just, you know, like put his hand up, you know, yellow card, there you go, just go away. And but of course, half the air squad goes over, and it's just sort of like, I don't think the Scottish leagues have implemented that rule that they have in. I know they had it at the Euros. I'm not sure if that was a trial or if that's something that has already been implemented in the other leagues, where only the captain can speak. I think we talked about this in the past at Fizzlegate, because Brian Gray was being a complete arse, but
I don't think it is in place.
I don't think it is here. They should probably implement it.
I found the whole thing just quite, like, kind of quite understandable from everyone's point of view, almost. Like, Byrne, I think, just panics. As you say, Scott, it's obviously something that, like, he is aware of, that this is a thing that he knows he can do to get out of bother occasionally. And it's just that he's not expecting the pass, let alone anything else. And then all of a sudden he's going down and he's like, we're all out of position. This is their body, and he's just grabbed at the ball, and he's got no awareness of whether he's inside the box or not. Even the thing with the referee, like you've just said, there's a lot of moving parts to that. His big error is getting his yellow card out, because he's clearly not had enough time to think about it. Because actually, as I say, I think fundamentally, he probably ends up with the right decision. And look, you could argue it different ways. Like, you could argue it as a foul initially, in which case none of the other stuff applies. But I think once you don't give the foul, I think it has to be a red card and a penalty at that point. So yeah, I was the same. It's overriding feeling on that was kind of frustration more than anything else, more than being kind of jumping up and down at the referee or any of that kind of stuff. Given that point, though, so you're 5 minutes to half time, down to 10 men, conceded the goal, so it's 1-0 at that point. Stick with you, Callum. Did you think that was kind of game over at that point, or did you think there was still a realistic chance for the Rovers to get something back from that?
I was just in the mind of, well, we're 1-0 down. We're a man down. Fuck it. Free hit. Just, it's like, no expectations out the window. Just do whatever, you know, just like, because obviously you've got this massive caveat of being a man down for what, an hour? It was about the 40th minute the penalty was given. That's basically what my feeling was going into halftime. That and also please get a pie.
Your mental maths has let you down slightly there, but I agree with the overall point. Yeah, it's that point. You're like, really, this is a free hit, really. I have to tell you, pessimism or whatever, I was pretty convinced that wasn't going to turn out to be our day. But then, I mean, really, we were as well just chunking this game down into the pre and post penalty, really, up until the second goal. I mean, Leslie, how about you? Is that, you know, as you go into the second half and the game goes on, I don't know what your starting point was, kind of pessimism versus optimism. Did you think the Rovers grew into the game at all? Did you think we might have been able to snatch something from that?
I wasn't optimistic of us snatching something after the penalty and the red card. And I think Partick fans coming away from Starks Park last week would probably have kind of felt the same as we felt after that game, and that they sort of thought, that we were in it until the penalty, and in their case the red card came a bit later, but it was like the same kind of thing that we were on the other end of last week. And of course at the time we didn't know that Sam Stanton was carrying an injury, so I was thinking, right, great, get him on and see if we can make something happen here, or say to Lewis Jameson, right, this is your chance, on you go and see if you can make something happen. We ended up with a situation where it effectively just killed the game entirely. And I mean, another thing that's maybe worth just adding as a point to this is we were missing a lot of starting players yesterday. And you would have thought, if we'd had Scott Brown, if we'd had Lewis Vaughan, if we'd had a fit Sam Stanton, even with 10 men, you'd fancy with some of those guys of that quality further up the pitch being available, that you'd fancy our chances to maybe get something. But given the injuries that we had, it just seemed like a really tall order to try and get something out of that. So you're sort of thinking, right, how do we go about this? Because you don't want to end up getting thumped, because that's not good for morale, it's not good for goal difference, it's not good for anybody. You don't want to end up getting thumped, so you don't want to do muddy ball. But at the same time, you're kind of thinking, right, how do we actually get something out of this with the limited resources we had available? So I was not optimistic after the penalty had gone in, and certainly not when the second half had started, I have to say.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Watching that second half play out, it was very, very difficult for Rovers to kind of establish any sort of foothold. And I think you're right. You look at the players who are missing, and you could make an argument for most of them being able to make a fairly significant kind of contribution in a game like that if you are going to turn it around. I think Scott Brown probably the biggest one. Just having him in the base of the midfield gives you a platform kind of to build from. But really up until the last maybe 5 minutes or so, I couldn't see where a goal was going to come from. Scott, yeah, give me your thoughts on anyone who was missing you think might have made a difference, or anything that you think in that second half that did give you any kind of cause for hope. But also, we both said previously we'd watched Ayr United hammer Airdrie. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, obviously it would be a different thing watching it when they're playing the Rovers, but a little bit kind of disappointed in Ayr United, or were you expecting to see more from Ayr United kind of second half, given the Rovers are down to 10 men?
Yeah, well, I mean, referring back to like missing players, I think I said in the preview podcast that any team that you have likes Lewis Vaughan and Scott Brown in is automatically going to be made better in the Championship. So I think these sort of guys, we've definitely missed them. I mean, I was saying as well last season, I think Scott Brown picked up a small injury at some point last season, and you could tell that we're just missing that sort of dig in midfield, because Matthews at the time was not long back for injury, and it was meaning that we were having to play Stanton deeper, which he's not really wanting to do at the end of the day. And then we actually went and tried Kyle Turner there at once, and it just didn't work either. So, no, I think the sooner that Brown's back in the midfield, the better. And I think almost that, I don't think it's like a automatic, but I think it almost makes sure that our winning percentage chance goes up a fair bit, especially at home, but in general, I think that he just seems to. You don't see him going about shouting at everybody, like trying to give everybody that sort of boost, but he just leads by example. I'd imagine he probably talks in the dressing room from time to time, but he definitely doesn't come across as this sort of shouting sort of guy, like you would have got back in the day with obviously like your likes of Roy Keane's and stuff like that. But I think he just seems to be somebody that has been here to prove a point in his first season, then was made captain, and then has proven that was the right decision by Ian Murray to make him captain. whilst Ross Matthews was out, because he's genuinely been one of the most consistent players outside of really Sam Stanton, to be honest, last season. So, I'm definitely one of the sort of leaders, if you want to call it, of the Scott Brown fan club. I think he sometimes was getting unfair stick. I think folk were just like, oh, he doesn't contribute enough with goals and assists. I went, it's not really his game. I mean, he got a perler last season against Dundee United, but it's just what he gives you is more than what you need him for goal. We've got other guys for goal scoring. His job's to win the ball back and give it. I mean, he's a decent passer of the ball himself, but give it to the more attacking players that will go and create chances. So, as I say, the sooner he's back, the better. And then, regarding to Aaron Gent, I was actually I've got a good mate of mine over here who's also a greenkeeper, and he's like, oh, well, you know what it's like when you play 10 men. It's difficult to break them down. And I was like, aye, but you didn't even really look like you were trying almost at times to break us down. There was a lot of side-to-side passing. There was just not... It just seemed to be that there wasn't a lot of urgency. But see, when you watched them against Airdrie in that 5-0, every time they got the ball, it seemed like they had the ball in their own half and they were into the Airdrie box within 10 seconds. That's what it felt like when you were watching them. Whereas against us, I don't know if it was just the way that we were set up, where maybe we're not giving ourselves enough credit defensively for stopping them with the men, but I just felt I was expecting more than, what did they get, a double save out of Dabrowski at one point, but that was about it really until the goal, and then even the goal was... I kind of agree with Potter in terms that I think Smith does actually slip when you watch the highlights, but I think the second one, Stevenson absolutely gets his jersey pulled back, and you can see that Stevenson's absolutely incensed that it's not been given, but at that point, it's 2-0 and it's game over anyway. But yeah, I think I suppose you could say that 2-0 is probably a fair reflection, but at the same time, I think it was also a little bit harsh because I didn't think they actually created a lot after the penalty, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you've said there. I was texting one of my mates during the game to kind of just give them updates on what was going on, and maybe halfway through the second half, I'd said, like, Ayr aren't doing anything. like, nothing's happened since half time. And what I said to him at the time was, it feels though like Ayr still have like more gears that they could go to if they needed to. But actually, I think that was based on the evidence of what I'd seen from them previously, rather than actually what anything they did yesterday. They just looked a bit kind of devoid of ideas and a bit sort of workmanlike, which, as you say, that they couldn't have been more like direct and all action and all that. Watching them in that game against Airdrie, when they hammered Airdrie, you'd think the only thing they could enjoy more than playing Airdrie would be playing a team with 10 men. With just like that little bit more space, they would run riot. And they just didn't. They really... and you're right, maybe the Rovers deserve a bit more credit than we're giving them for kind of not allowing that to happen. But yeah, I was sort of expecting, or I suppose probably the best way to put it, I was fearing worse when we went down to 10 men in the first half. I thought, all right, second half, they could really cause us some issues, and they basically didn't. As you say, second goal, it's definitely a foul on Stevenson. There's no other way to interpret that. But I think 2-0 probably was a fairer reflection on the pattern of the game. The Rovers, I think, had one shot on target, and it was you and Murray from about 25 yards in about 2 minutes to go. So, Leslie, in terms of kind of summing up from that, any significant takeaways from you? Are you prepared to just consign that to the hinterland of this was an interim period between two managers, went down to 10 men, and you move on? And also, I've asked a lot of double questions this episode. I'm going to do it again. Anyone in particular you want to kind of single out for some praise on that? And you can give them a man of the match if you really want to.
I mean, this is going to sound really harsh, but it reminded me of one of the games towards the end of Ian Murray's first season. And that's not a criticism of any of our players. there were a lot of extenuating circumstances yesterday, which I'll come on to in a second, but it was kind of one of those games where we'd gone behind and you're thinking, right, there's really nothing on the bench that's going to allow us to change us up or do anything significantly differently. And we just saw that kind of panning out. At some point, I was actually kind of expecting Conor McBride to come off the bench. It was I was getting those kind of flashbacks. But as I say, that is in no way a criticism of the guys on the pitch. I think the work rate was excellent yesterday. I think, in terms of the actual performance and just the kind of actually what we were seeing out of the guys, it was a lot better than what we'd seen against Airdrie and against Stranraer, those games. Also, just worth noting as well as the guys that were missing, we had Lewis Stevenson at right back and Liam Dick at left back. And Stevenson at left back's been one of the real bright spots this season. So we know Liam Dick's a fantastic defender, but you are just losing that a little bit going forward. And that's another thing to factor in as well that I think kind of made me less likely to think we were going to get something out of it. But in terms of kind of good stuff, Paul Hanlon, I thought, well, first of all, I was just delighted that he lasted longer than Lee Ashcroft did at Somerset Park.
Yes.
Second, I thought he was just fantastic. I thought he was a real class act. Really, really good in defence. Calm, composed, making a lot of last-ditch interventions. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how the team develops with Paul Hanlon in it. And he would probably be my man of the match, but just a little word for our new acquisition, Lewis Jameson as well. Tough shift to come on when, victim of circumstance, you're not really getting a lot of service. So he had some really nice little touches, really nice touches of the ball. And again, when he's had a bit more time to bed in and under other circumstances, very much looking forward to seeing what he could do.
Yeah, absolutely. Callum, for you, any final thoughts? Anyone you want to single out?
I don't think I could really single anyone out. It was just a good, solid team performance given the circumstances, as Les was saying. That's pretty much all I have to say, really.
Fair enough. Scott, for you, any final thoughts?
No, I would just echo kind of what Les said. I think Hanlon showed that he's probably a class above the Championship, and he'll probably, as long as he stays fit, he'll go on to show that it's a very good signing by us, and it's a bit of a coup to get somebody at his level, and that's been capped actually, to be dropping down. There was Hibs fans still arguably saying that, looking especially at the start of their season, why did we not keep him? Because they're still conceding goals and not looking great at the back. So, yeah, again, I thought Stevenson was really steady, considering he was asked to play in a position that, when I look back at his Hibs career, I'm certain I never once seen him at right back. I might be wrong, at some point he did fill in there during a game or something, but I've only ever really seen him play further down the left-hand side or in the midfield. I've never seen him playing at right back. So that's why it never even came to my head that I thought, they might put him at right back just because he's more experienced. But I just thought, well, why do that when you can get away with a back three here with like Mullen at a right wing back sort of? But they maybe just wanted a sort of more defensive-minded guy against somebody like Jamie Murphy, who might have given Mullen more of a runaround compared to Stevenson. But these sort of guys, I thought, other than his kicking, I thought Kev was pretty solid again in terms of his shot stopping. But at the end of the day, if you take his kicking out of his game, he is still the best keeper in the Championship by a mile, because I think it was the second save, especially in the second half of that double save, that I'm not sure many of the goalies in the Championship might have got to that. A few of them might, but it was just the reaction to just quickly dive down, and the fact he's 6'5", 6'6" to be able to stretch there as well. So I thought, other than obviously his part in he didn't get Byrne sent off, but his part in that with his bad kick, other than that, I thought he had a fairly solid game as well.
Yeah, I think in terms of Lewis Stevenson, I don't think he's played right back before either. That's the kind of thing you've really got to come to Wraith Rovers before that happens to you. That's if you're a defender and you really want to play out of position, come to Starks Park, we'll sort you out. The only other name that's not been mentioned in any great detail that I wanted to spend just a couple of seconds on was Josh Mullen, actually. As you say, Jamie Murphy was on that wing, and I thought Josh Mullen, a very, very kind of disciplined performance on that side. First half in particular, that was kind of in front of where I was. And clearly very conscious of the fact that Stevenson's not a right back, and he'd a power of work, just making sure that Lewis Stevenson wasn't being isolated, but then at the same time, he's the first one to break away. I thought the last kind of 5 or 10 minutes, if we were going to get anything, it was going to come from a Mullen cross. That seemed to be the sort of route to goal if we had one. So, yeah, it's I don't think, I mean, it's not really the nature of how we like to do this podcast anyway, but I don't think there's anyone there you could really single out on the other side, anyone that you could really go and say, you know, you really let your team down or any of that Rovers side. I mean, even Shaun Byrne, who made that big mistake, before he went off, I think he was probably our best player up until that point. You know, and it's one mistake. It's a kind of panicky error of judgment. I don't think anybody's going to hold that against them or anything like that. So I think that'll probably do us for the game from yesterday. So tell you what, let's have a quick break and we will be right back.
This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. Every week we talk about the Rovers' latest attempts to climb the SPFL ladder, but sometimes even a ladder won't reach. DIS are specialists in working at height, offering maintenance, inspection, repair and more, right across Scotland. So if you need a rope access specialist and you want a premiership service, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk to find out more.
So let's round off this episode with a try and pick our moods up a little bit, and we'll have a little round of Should McStay or Should Dargo, which normally a pre-match thing, but we get beat and didn't want to talk about it very much, so we're going to do one of these instead. And I'm going to keep the hot seat. I'm going to pose the puzzle this time around, and your clue number 1 is: I am 6'4" tall.
That's not a flat mix, so.
Ethan Varian.
Where do you start with this?
I always write down what people are guessing as we go for this. I don't know why. It's not like there's an archive or like we're going to have to go back in years to come and see who did the best.
I've, as people will know from Thursday night after getting very little sleep on Thursday night and Friday, I've decided to start writing down the clues so that I don't forget that Rudy Scatchell was capped at Scotland.
Or that Chris Hamilton played for us.
Who that was 6'4"?
Is Lee Ashcroft 6'4"?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Just because I thought he was the answer on Thursday, I don't think he's quite that tall, but I'll go Lewis Tosney.
All right.
I'm just going to go with Lee Ashcroft. I don't think he's 6'4", but I think he's tall. I think. Didn't see
clue
it.
Number 2. I also played for Alloa and Livingston, among others.
Guido van de Kamp. I've no idea if he played for Livy. The Alloa and height and the fact that we've got somebody from the Netherlands on the screen just made me jump out of excitement. I think that may be totally wrong, but let's just stick with it.
Plays for Livy anymore.
I don't think Greg Spence played for Livingston, did he?
He certainly isn't 6'4".
That's the second point as well. I'm just thinking names. I think I'm going to
I'm struggling here for somebody that tall that's played for the three clubs there.
I'm struggling to remember something that tall.
Again,
Wait,
like
hold on,
he's
wait.
not he's nowhere near that at all, and I don't think he's ever been at Livy. Kyle Benedictus.
No, he's short.
See,
He is
I think he's
short.
only about
Benedict.
6 foot or 6'1", but like he's played for
I don't
Alloa
even think
and
he's
played for
6
us.
foot.
It's a
Did
better guess
Jamie
Lewis Dostal
McDonald
because he's
play?
not played for either of them.
Can I just interject here and say how wounding it is to people like me and John Greer to hear somebody saying only 6 foot?
Hello down there.
Callum, did you say Jamie McDonald? Did I hear you say that in there?
Yeah, Jamie McDonald.
All right. So your next clue. I scored 7 goals in 29 games for the Rovers.
Guido had some clear of us. Sorry, what was it? 7 goals in 29 games for us?
It was seven goals in 29 games, yes.
Right, so we'll caveat the usual is it's either somebody that was there for a season or 2 and he was maybe injured at some point. But 7 for 29, that's not terrible.
Fuck it. No, but he never scored.
I mean, that's probably a midfielder then, I'm taking that, with 7 and 29.
I don't know, it could be a midfielder striker, no, not.
I mean, there's only one guy I know that has played for the 3 of us, but I don't even think he's above 5'8". And I'm sure he's been an answer on here before in Liam Buchanan.
Oh. Oh.
I'm struggling here for this, like...
Jack Hamilton?
I keep wanting to comment on these guesses and I realise that it's not really... I can't really do that without...
You're going...
I thought he was saying something, but...
Well, when you said Greg Spence, it was like, has he played for Livingston? It's like, he's quite Livingston-y, Greg Spence. But it's not him. But I mean, he's quite Livingston-y. And I think he's taller than you'd think as well, but not 6'4".
That's a reference to Greg Spence, right? And not...
Yes, that's only Greg
Okay.
Spence.
Okay.
The mystery player you're looking for is 6'4".
I'm going to go with... I've put Jamie Hamilton now. Jack Hamilton. I'm going to go with Jack Hamilton.
Any further guesses?
I'm struggling for a name here, like, at all. I think the fact that you've put the height in makes me think, like, I should know who this is. Like, that's quite, like, probably one of the tallest Rovers players, like, in... Well, I'm assuming it's somebody that I've watched. It could be somebody before I was born, but...
So I wondered if this was my clues were too kind of opaque. So I put in an extra one in case I thought I need that. We'll bring it in now. So you just mentioned there.
I haven't made a third guess yet. I'm going to make a third guess purely because his son played really well yesterday. I'm going to go with Darren Henderson.
All
I don't
right.
even know who that is.
He played in the early 2000s. I programmed him into Pro Evo 98 and he scored from the halfway line against Juventus. That doesn't count in his career goals.
So your next clue, which hopefully will help you kind of start narrowing
Is
it
it that
down.
he was on Leslie's PES game?
So your next clue, which I think is clue number 4. I played under Craig Levine. To be clear, this is at the Rovers. Played under Craig
I was
Levine.
going to
Not
think that.
solely. I don't know if Craig Levine even managed 29 games, but one of
He
my
was only
managers
there,
at the Rovers
4 months
was
max?
Craig Levine.
When was Craig Levine at the Rovers? That was like 2005, 2006, something like that.
It was before McGlynn.
Yeah, I'm going to say it was the 06-07 season. That again, it might.
I don't think it helps you either way. I think it was the season after that.
Yeah, I was going to say it's either 07 or 07-08, but I can't remember which one.
It's one of those two. It's around about 2007.
Well, I mean, my issue is
I'm
that
really
I started
struggling for that
going to
squad,
games in
to be honest.
2008, so...
Gary Wales. I've no idea about height, but just the other stuff adds up.
Yeah,
If,
that squad.
one of the next clues is about being really handsome, you could be right there.
I could not name anyone because
It's not.
I don't know anyone who played under Craig Levine. Maybe Laurie Ellis played, but he's played like 400 games or something.
Yeah, I've not even got a guess for this.
All right. One of my cousins enjoyed greater success in Scottish and European football, and also played for Wraith Rovers.
Leslie's probably got this, isn't it?
That's Armadoni.
Could be.
What was it? Cousin and what?
One of my cousins enjoyed greater success in both Scottish and European football, and also played for Wraith Rovers.
No. I mean, it's probably as good a guess as anyone said all day. Is probably Armandoni.
And I have 2 further clues written down. So my contract with the Rovers was terminated by mutual consent, so I could move to Finland. And last year, my son was sold to Sheffield United by Hamilton Accies. It is
And
indeed.
Clue 8 is I used to be shite, but now I'm all right.
Well done, Les. It was indeed.
He really
Armandoni.
missed a trick wearing the number 1.
One of the there's a brilliant photo of him scoring for us in like a Challenge Cup game up at McDermott Park, and he's like mid volley, but the way that the shot's framed, the way the photograph is framed, is it's just the last 3 letters of St Johnston on the seats behind him. So it's him taking the shot, and between him and the goal, it just says
his
Oni.
name.
It's very good. It's a brilliant piece of photography. Yeah, well done, Les. That was a good one. As I say, I felt like that was pretty opaque as we were going through, but I wondered if the cousin would give it away. Cousin, I should have said, is Gregory Taddy, incidentally, for anyone who hadn't put that all together already. Yeah, I think inarguably more successful in European terms, given he went and played in the Champions League. And I think Armandoni played a couple of games for sort of nonce reserves and maybe something. I think he played 2 inter-total cup games for the Finnish side that he went to. But proper kind of cult hero status, I think, Armandoni. Ticks a lot of the right boxes for that. And he's in the same squad photo as Craig Levine, which is where the background for that photo came from.
I wouldn't have put him in that squad at all with Levine for some reason.
The appearance and goal numbers, I am absolutely rock solid on because they came out of Always Next Season.
I love how we now have to
on
Wikipedia.
I wasn't having anybody digging me out for that, so I thought I'm going to go for someone who's in that book.
What I will say is, to back the Todd Lumsden stuff up, is that we've now checked about 4 different websites and all 4 have said different. So,
yeah, went to club historian John Greer and he went to Always Next Season
and said a 5th different.
You know, yeah.
At this point, I'm just going to put a pitch in that when it comes to the point to write the sequel to Always Next Season, it has to be called In a Few Weeks When Everyone's Fit.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on. I mean, it only goes up something like 2008.
Always another moonboot.
So, it'd be nice to get a second version. There's a fair bit that's happened since then. But I think that will bring us to a close for today. So just before we do round up, though, a massive well done to Graham Meldrum, who completed the Kirkcaldy half marathon this morning and raised a really decent amount of money for the Community Foundation and season tickets for kids who might not otherwise get one. So really brilliant work from him. Thank you to everybody who chipped in to support them. The Just Giving page, which was in the notes from the last episode, is still open. So you can still contribute to that at any time. Community Foundation, I'm sure, will be very, very grateful. And I'm sure we'll hear from Graham soon enough back on the podcast too. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I have said this twice now, but fingers crossed we will have a new manager in before the next podcast on Thursday. And if we do, you can expect to hear from us. But taking nothing for granted on that. We will see what happens when it comes. So we will be back at some point. And as I say, regardless, we'll be back at Thursday at the latest with a preview of the next match at home to Livingston. So thank you again, and goodbye.